Millionaire's mistress made him believe his wife's baby was the devil he called an exorcist. They say the devil wears many faces, but in this story he seems to have worn the delicate smile of a newborn baby, at least according to one man's twisted belief. Michael Carter, a self-made millionaire, never thought his life could spin so far off the rails. But when secrets, deception, and a single whisper of a diabolical presence seized him, his world turned into a battleground of faith and paranoia. His mistress wove a terrifying tale about his very own child being demon-possessed, pushing him to the brink of desperation. In his frenzy, Michael summoned an exorcist, hoping, somehow, to save them all. Michael Carter had always prided himself on being a man of logic. Growing up in a small Midwestern town, he'd overcome countless obstacles to become a millionaire before he turned 35. Now, at age 40, he owned Carter Interiors, an international furniture company that catered to celebrities, foreign dignitaries, and everyone in between. He'd once been the symbol of aspiration, unstoppable, level-headed, guided by reason. But beneath that veneer of corporate success lay the hidden cracks that come with every high-stakes lifestyle: a marriage in turmoil, an affair in full bloom, and a heart torn between guilt and desire. His wife, Sharon Rutherford Carter, had known him since they were both college students at Penn State. She was the steady anchor during his early struggles, the one who saw potential in him when no one else did. As Michael's empire grew, so did the distance between them. Business trips turned into endless nights away, fancy dinners turned into tense discussions about the future, and their once loving bond was stretched too thin. When Sharon announced her pregnancy, Michael felt a wave of unexpected relief. Perhaps this child would be the glue that held them together. For a while, he actually believed it. He came home earlier, listened to her talk about baby names, and even decorated the nursery himself. The child, a baby girl they planned to name Emily, represented hope. Yet, as the due date inched closer, temptations outside the marriage tightened their hold on Michael. The main temptation came in the form of Eleanor Brooks, an exquisite beauty who worked in Michael's marketing department. She was confident, flamboyant, and fiercely ambitious, everything that ignited his dormant desires. Their affair began innocently enough, or so he told himself, late-night strategy sessions, discussing new marketing campaigns, sharing a bottle of wine to celebrate a new contract. Before he knew it, Michael was lost in a haze of sexual tension and emotional dependence. Eleanor was intoxicating, a flame dancing close to the very paper walls of his crumbling marriage. His guilt manifested in the strangest ways: an inability to sleep, constant agitation, and a subtle resentment towards Sharon. He justified his feelings by insisting that Sharon didn't understand him or didn't appreciate his dedication to the business. In truth, he was running from the guilt that gnawed at him every time he looked at his pregnant wife's eyes brimming with trust. It was around this time that Eleanor planted the first seed of paranoia. She was sitting in Michael's office, swirling a cup of espresso like a glass of fine wine. "You know," she whispered, crossing her legs slowly, "there are energies in this world we can't explain. Sometimes they attach themselves to innocence." Her voice was so gentle, so probing, that Michael chuckled at first. Spirits? Demons? Nonsense, he thought. They were a pair of modern, educated professionals. Why would she mention such superstitions? But Eleanor's eyes sparkled with a hint of mystery. "I come from a long line of clairvoyance," she continued, tracing circles on his desk. "My grandmother swore she could see the darkness in a person's aura, and I see darkness in your wife, Michael. I see it around the baby." Michael's first instinct was to dismiss her, yet a faint chill crept down his spine. "Eleanor, that's absurd," he said, trying to keep his voice firm. But the doubt had been planted. That night, As he lay in bed beside Sharon, her swollen belly rising and falling, with each breath he couldn't shake a sense of unease. Why had Eleanor said those things? Had she seen something real? As the weeks passed, Eleanor's claims took on a more ominous tone. She would approach Michael with stories of exorcisms and devilish possessions, recounting how she'd witnessed a distant cousin in Massachusetts become infected by an evil spirit. That cousin had displayed signs of unnatural strength and chilling outbursts of wrath, requiring a priest's intervention to save her from the beast within. Under normal circumstances, Michael would have laughed such tales off, but the stress of his double life wore him down. Running a massive corporation, juggling an affair, and maintaining a facade with Sharon had drained his emotional reserves. He found himself strangely captivated by Eleanor's stories. Something in him, a combination of guilt, fear, and the search for an answer to his life's unraveling, wanted to believe. He thought, if a supernatural explanation existed for the tension he felt at home, maybe he wasn't entirely to blame. One evening after a company gala, Eleanor cornered Michael by the marble staircase. Her eyes flitted to the shadows, checking that no one was eavesdropping. She leaned in close, her perfume sweet but pungent. "Michael," she said, voice trembling, "I had the most terrible vision. I saw your wife giving birth, but the child wasn't human. Its eyes were black as night, and there was a voice, an unholy voice chanting inside the delivery room. It's a demon, Michael. I'm certain of it." For a moment, Michael felt the floor drop from under him. He inhaled, catching the subtle whiff of scotch on her breath. "Eleanor, you've had too much to drink," he responded, more to convince himself than her. But she wouldn't relent. She grabbed his arm, nails digging into his skin. "If you won't believe me, just watch. You'll see that baby is a monster." He yanked his arm free, anger rising. "Stop this, Eleanor. This is my child we're talking about." Yet, deep down, a kernel of anxiety took root. He'd never been superstitious, but there was something about Eleanor's tone that had become frighteningly convincing. Each day, she layered on a new story, a new premonition, fueling the spark of dread. When Sharon's water broke 3 weeks prematurely, Michael rushed to the hospital, his heart pounding with conflicting emotions. On the drive there, Eleanor's voice kept echoing in his mind, eyes black as night, an unholy voice. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that the baby was simply coming early. But upon arriving at the hospital, he found Sharon in a state of excruciating pain beyond the normal range of contractions. Her face was ashen, and she clawed at the sheets, screaming in agony. The monitors beeped frantically. Doctors rushed in with concerned frowns. The lights flickered just for a split second. In Michael's hyper-alert state, it seemed as though the entire hospital corridor darkened ominously. For an instant, he truly believed something was terribly wrong, not medically, but spiritually. When Emily Carter finally came into the world, Sharon collapsed into exhausted sobs, and Michael nearly fainted at the side of the bed. The infant had a strong, healthy cry, and in those first moments she looked entirely normal. No black eyes, no demonic chanting, nothing at all to suggest she was anything but a precious newborn. Relief flooded Michael's system, and he felt tears well up, realizing how absurd his panic had been. Yet the relief was short-lived. Within hours, while Sharon drifted in and out of post-labor slumber, Michael noticed Emily's skin felt unusually cold. A nurse, checking on her, frowned, telling him it was just the abrupt temperature change after birth. But then Emily opened her eyes, and for a brief moment they seemed too dark, almost like swirling pools of ink. Michael blinked, convinced it was a trick of the overhead lighting. Still, the seed of paranoia that Eleanor had planted took root. When Eleanor visited Sharon in the hospital, under the guise of work obligations that demanded her to deliver documents for Michael, she cast a strange look upon the baby. She didn't coo or fawn over Emily like most visitors. Instead, she regarded her warily, as if the child might suddenly leap up and hiss. As Eleanor left the room, she passed Michael in the hallway and whispered, "Watch her closely. You'll see." That night, Michael was plagued by nightmares. He saw Emily morph into a creature with glowing red eyes, screeching like a banshee. He woke drenched in sweat, guilt and confusion warring in his mind. Why was he allowing Eleanor's words to control him? Why couldn't he simply be happy about his daughter's birth? Returning home from the hospital presented a fresh set of challenges. Sharon, still weak from the early delivery, needed extensive rest. Michael hired a live-in nurse named Marta Delgado, a kind woman in her early 60s, to help take care of Emily. Yet with each passing day, Michael found himself noticing odd occurrences. Emily's fussiness was off the charts. Her cries sounded almost otherworldly. At times when Emily stared at him, it was as though she was sizing him up, measuring the depth of his fear. He chastised himself for harboring such thoughts. Babies cry, he told himself. Babies stare. But the illusions persisted. Eleanor, meanwhile, seized on every incident. She'd come by under the pretense of marketing discussions or business proposals, only to poke and pry at Emily's condition. "Has she been crying at 3 in the morning?" she asked, her gaze sly. "Have you seen any strange bruises on Sharon or Marta?" It never ended. The tension soared, and while Sharon couldn't pinpoint the exact cause of Michael's increasing anxiety, she sensed him drifting away from her again. She saw him texting on his phone late at night, holding whispered conversations in the backyard. She didn't know about Eleanor's manipulations, but she suspected Michael was hiding something. The sweet dream of their child, bringing them closer, was dissolving into a haze of suspicion and dread. Marta was a devout Catholic who regularly attended services at a local church, St. Jude's Parish. One morning, Michael overheard her speaking quietly to Sharon in the nursery, reciting a few lines of prayer under her breath while rocking Emily. Sharon, concerned, asked if something was wrong. Marta hesitated. Sometimes the baby cries as if she's in deep pain and then stops just as abruptly. It's probably normal, but I'm praying for her health and safety." She forced a reassuring smile, but her eyes betrayed unease. Michael cornered Marta later that day. "What do you mean you're praying for her safety? Is there something you're not telling us?" His words sounded harsher than he intended, colored by his own paranoia. Marta, humble and calm, explained, "I've seen many babies in my career. Emily is a little different. There's a presence around her, I can't explain it. I'm not saying it's evil, but it feels heavy. I just want to protect her, Mr. Carter." She pressed a hand to her crucifix necklace. "Sometimes prayer is the best comfort we can offer." Her genuine concern rattled Michael more than Eleanor's manipulative suggestions ever had. Marta was known for her level head, for her caring heart. She had never spouted superstitions. If she sensed something unusual, could it be real? Eleanor found out about Marta's remark, likely because Michael, in a moment of confusion, confided in her about it and wasted no time amplifying it. You see, even a devout woman senses the darkness. She gloated over the phone. "It's not just me, Michael. You have to act." But what action could he take? Michael's mind drifted to the unthinkable exorcisms. They were rituals, yes, but typically overshadowed by sensational stories of possessed individuals speaking in Latin or convulsing unnaturally. Could such a thing be performed on an infant? The idea repulsed and horrified him. Yet each day, Emily's persistent wailing, the flickers of shadow in the nursery at odd hours, and Sharon's growing exhaustion fueled his terror. Then came the moment that shattered his resolve. Late one evening, Michael returned from a meeting to find Sharon distraught. She cradled Emily, who was shrieking so violently she seemed unable to breathe. Sharon sobbed, I tried everything, feeding her, changing her, rocking her. She won't stop. Her eyes brimmed with fear. Michael, it's like she's in a trance. She won't even look at me. As Michael reached out to take Emily, the baby suddenly went quiet. Her gaze locked on him, her eyes wide and eerily aware. In that second, Michael felt an electric jolt of dread, as though something with its own consciousness peered back at him. The baby's lips parted, and a tiny coo escaped, but it was so low it sent chills across his skin. He fumbled, nearly dropping Emily, handing her back to Sharon as if burned. Sleep eluded him entirely that night. He tossed and turned, unable to rid himself of the impression that Emily's stare was malevolent. Rationally, he knew it was preposterous. This was a newborn, hardly capable of conscious thought, let alone evil intentions. But the illusions wouldn't fade. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that dark stare repeating in his mind, like a broken record. Michael sought out Dr. Leonard Holstrom, a respected child psychologist, under the guise of asking for techniques to soothe a colicky baby. He expected a logical, scientific explanation. Maybe Emily had reflux. Maybe she was overly sensitive to stimuli. After examining Emily's behavior for a short consultation, Dr. Holstrom concluded that the baby seemed perfectly fine physically. However, he did notice that Michael appeared distressed, almost frantic, as though searching for a diagnosis beyond the medical realm. Michael, Dr. Holstrom said gently, a baby cries for all sorts of reasons, discomfort, hunger, even overstimulation. But your worry, it goes beyond the normal scope of a concerned father. Is there something else weighing on you? Michael forced a laugh. I've just got a lot on my plate, business and all. He departed quickly, but Dr. Holstrom's concern nagged at him. The man must have sensed something off in his demeanor. Meanwhile, Eleanor's visits became more frequent. Her presence in the Carter household started raising Sharon's suspicions. She found it strange that a mere marketing employee would need to drop by so often. Though Eleanor disguised her visits as urgent strategy sessions, Sharon could see the tension between her husband and this beautiful, poised woman. The fact that their daughter's crying, often intensified whenever Eleanor was around, only deepened the sense of unease. One afternoon, Sharon accidentally overheard a snippet of conversation between Michael and Eleanor. They were in his study, door partially ajar. It has to be done soon, Eleanor insisted, her voice low and urgent. You have to call someone who understands the darkness. Let him see what's become of your baby. Sharon froze, her pulse hammering. What on earth are they talking about? She wondered. A creeping horror bloomed within her. She'd felt the distance between her and Michael grow more pronounced, but never imagined he was conspiring with another woman about something so bizarre. She pushed open the door, trembling. Michael, she demanded, what's going on here? Eleanor's gaze flicked to Sharon, a brief flash of annoyance crossing her face. Michael stammered, nothing, honey, we were just discussing how to help Emily. Eleanor finished smoothly, flashing a saccharine smile. She's been so restless, poor thing, and we were thinking a spiritual counselor might bring some peace. Sharon looked at them both, her dread mixing with anger. Emily needs a pediatrician, not a spiritual counselor. She glared at Eleanor. Why is this any of your concern? Eleanor blinked, adopting a wounded expression. I only care about Michael's well-being, and thus your family's. We want what's best for Emily. She glanced at Michael, seeking validation. Sharon turned to her husband, voice quivering. Michael, if you think something is wrong with Emily, then we'll take her to the best doctors. But I won't have whatever this is in our house. She stormed out, tears stinging her eyes. That night, Michael tried to explain everything to Sharon, but realized how ridiculous it sounded. He couldn't outright say he believed Emily might be possessed. It would devastate Sharon or drive her away entirely. So he spun half-truths, insisting that Eleanor's family had experience with spiritual matters, and maybe they could find a holistic solution to calm Emily's fits. Sharon, exhausted and emotionally raw, reluctantly agreed to let Michael explore any avenue that might help, but remained suspicious of Eleanor's involvement. Within days, Eleanor connected Michael to a man named Bishop Adrian Guzman. Guzman was not affiliated with a mainstream diocese. He was more of a rogue exorcist, rumored to handle cases that even the established church would not touch. Michael felt uneasy contacting someone so unorthodox, but Eleanor insisted he was the best, that he'd performed dozens of cleansings. The mistress was playing a high-stakes game, fueling Michael's conviction that the baby carried an evil spirit, all while secretly harboring her own agenda. When Michael told Sharon they had a meeting with Bishop Guzman, she was livid. "An exorcist, Michael? Have you lost your mind?" She was postpartum, vulnerable, and enraged that her husband was bringing a stranger to their home to label their newborn as cursed. Michael desperately pleaded, "I just want to rule out any possibility. I can't sleep, can't focus on work, and Eleanor believes—" Sharon's face went pale. "Eleanor again? Michael, she's controlling you. Can't you see that?" She turned away, rocking Emily in her arms. "All this talk of demons, it's insane. Our daughter isn't possessed." Deep down, Michael wanted to believe Sharon. He wanted to cast aside every bizarre notion that had taken hold of him since Eleanor began her slow manipulation. But fear is a powerful motivator, and guilt makes it even more potent. Deep in his subconscious, Michael worried his affair had tainted his family. Perhaps this was divine retribution. Maybe the dark aura around Emily was a reflection of his own sins, somehow passed on to her. If there was even a sliver of truth in that, he had to address it, no matter how outlandish it might seem. Bishop Guzman arrived late on a Sunday afternoon, a tall man with stooped shoulders, deep, set eyes, and a quiet voice that carried a strange intensity. He wore a simple black cassock, a gold cross hanging around his neck. He studied the Carter's opulent mansion with disinterest, focusing instead on the intangible atmosphere. "I sense unrest here," he muttered, tracing a finger along the foyer's polished banister as if searching for clues. Sharon watched him with a mixture of anger and trepidation, standing protectively near Emily. Marta hovered in the background, making the sign of the cross. Eleanor lingered by the far wall, arms folded, smug satisfaction written on her face. Michael cleared his throat. "Bishop Guzman, thank you for coming." He gestured to Emily, who was nestled in Sharon's arms. We've experienced some unsettling occurrences." Sharon let out an incredulous scoff, but Guzman held up a gentle hand. "I do not judge," he said. "I only seek to help." He approached mother and child. Emily looked up at him, her eyes wide with curiosity or fear. Guzman whispered a prayer in Latin, then lightly touched the baby's forehead. Emily whimpered, a feeble cry escaping her tiny lips. Bishop Guzman's expression shifted from solemn to vaguely alarmed. "This child. There is something here," he whispered, a heavy weight on her soul. Sharon erupted. "She's a baby, for heaven's sake. A baby doesn't have all weight on her soul." She clutched Emily tighter. "I'm not allowing any so-called exorcism on my child." "Get out of my house." Eleanor stepped forward, voice smooth as silk. "Please, Sharon. We're only trying to help you and Emily. The bishop has seen these cases before." Sharon glared at her, tears of rage in her eyes. "You have no right to speak to me about my daughter. You're an outsider here. This is my family, my child. Leave us alone." Michael tried to interject, but Bishop Guzman calmly said, "I understand the mother's fear. And though my presence stirs conflict, I must warn you, if you ignore the signs, it may grow stronger." The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. Sharon, trembling, refused to relinquish Emily. Guzman didn't press it. He simply reached into a satchel, extracting a small bottle of holy water and handing it to Michael. "If you change your mind, perform these prayers," he said quietly, handing Michael a tattered booklet with instructions. "I'll be waiting." In the days following Bishop Guzman's visit, the household was a minefield of clashing perspectives. Marta continued to pray quietly under her breath each morning. Sharon resented Michael with fresh intensity, feeling betrayed and humiliated that he'd brought an exorcist into their home. Eleanor, triumphant in her manipulative success, kept weaving more stories of dark omens. Michael found himself in a pit of confusion. At night, he hovered by Emily's crib, studying her sleeping face for any trace of malevolence. By day, he wrestled with the swirling conspiracies that Eleanor fed him, the cautionary words from Bishop Guzman, and the brutal reality that Sharon would likely leave him if he continued down this path. All the while, the baby's crying spells intensified. Emily would wail for hours, inconsolable, her little fists clenched, eyes squeezed shut as though battling some unseen torment. Sharon insisted on a thorough medical examination, but every doctor said the same thing. The baby is physically healthy. The crying might be colic or a developmental phase. None of that alleviated the dread settling like storm clouds in Michael's mind. One evening, Sharon confronted Michael in the kitchen. She looked worn, dark circles under her eyes. "I'm going to stay at my mother's house for a few days," she said. "I can't handle this environment anymore." "You've let that woman, Eleanor, drive us to madness with these demon fantasies." Michael gripped the edge of the countertop. "Sharon, please, don't go. This is your home. We're a family." "No," she said, voice cracking. "We're not a family right now. You've put more faith in your mistress's outlandish stories than in your own child and wife. I need space to think, and I need to protect Emily from this craziness." His chest tightened. Was he truly losing everything because of a rumor, a suspicion, a superstition? He tried to muster an apology, to confess that he'd been manipulated, but he couldn't find the words. Guilt and fear choked him. He watched Sharon pack a small suitcase with trembling hands, saw her gently wrap Emily in a blanket, and felt his world teeter on the brink. Before she left, Sharon paused in the doorway. "If you want us back, fix this mess. Cut ties with Eleanor. Stop this exorcism nonsense. Be a father to Emily, or we're done." Her tear-filled eyes lingered on him for one last moment before she disappeared into the night. Michael sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. He could almost feel the mansion's walls closing in around him. Minutes later, his phone buzzed. "A text from Eleanor. I heard Sharon left. This is good. Now you can do what must be done." He stared at the message, heart pounding with a fury he could barely contain. He was on the verge of losing his wife and child because of this obsession, and Eleanor still insisted it was good. A part of him despised her in that moment. Another part, the paranoid part, still wondered if she was right about the evil presence. Exhaustion overtook him, and he collapsed into a restless sleep on the couch, half hoping he'd never wake to face the storm he'd created. What Michael didn't know was that Eleanor had orchestrated far more than just a twisted suspicion. She had an agenda that reached far beyond obsession or jealousy. She wanted Sharon out of the picture so she could claim Michael's wealth and status for herself. In her mind, if Sharon left for good, Eleanor would rise to become Michael's partner, both in business and in life. Eleanor had discovered a vulnerable man, riddled with guilt over his affair, and exploited every insecurity. She used his susceptibility to superstition, combined with the spectacle of Emily's difficult infancy, to drive a wedge between him and Sharon. Now, the final stage of her plan was in motion, convincing Michael to perform a radical cleansing that would push Sharon over the edge, leaving her no choice but to sever ties. Sitting in her penthouse apartment, Eleanor reviewed bank statements and property documents. She fantasized about the day when she and Michael would merge their fortunes. But she was no fool. She recognized that Michael was teetering, uncertain. If she pushed too hard, she might lose him. So she dialed his number, softening her voice to a concerned purr. "Michael," she whispered, "I'm worried about you. Are you all right?" His voice came through hollow, drained. Sharon left. She took Emily. He paused. "Eleanor, I think I've made a terrible mistake." "Shh," she cooed. "It's Sharon who can't see the truth, not you. She'll understand when the darkness is gone. Think of how safe Emily will be once you're sure no evil can claim her." He paused, haunted by doubt. I don't know anymore." Eleanor seized the moment. "Do you trust me, Michael?" A long silence followed. "I do," he finally said, though a part of him cringed at the words. "Good. Then let Bishop Guzman do his job. Call him back. Have him cleanse your home at least. That way, when Sharon comes back, she'll see there's nothing left to fear." In that moment, Michael rationalized that a house blessing might be less invasive than performing a ritual directly on Emily. Perhaps it would suffice to quell any spiritual negativity. He agreed, not realizing that once Bishop Guzman stepped foot in the house again, the exorcist would insist on a deeper cleansing and a confrontation with the infant spirit. Michael scheduled the appointment, carefully omitting the detail from Sharon. He assured himself it was just a blessing, that no harm would come to anyone. But on the chosen day, a thunderstorm loomed over the city like a bad omen. The mansion's windows rattled with gusts of wind as Bishop Guzman arrived. They moved through each room, the bishop sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers in Latin. Michael followed closely, an uneasy tension swirling in his chest. As they proceeded upstairs, the lights flickered and a chill seeped into the corridors. Upon reaching the nursery, still decorated with pastel wallpaper, a crib full of soft toys, and a mobile of stars and moons, Bishop Guzman stopped abruptly. He closed his eyes, breathing labored. "Yes," he said, voice echoing in the quiet room. "There's something here." Michael's heart lurched. Emily wasn't present, of course. Sharon had taken her away. But the bishop seemed transfixed on the crib. He whispered an ancient prayer, tracing a cross in the air. Abruptly, the mobile above the crib began to spin on its own. A gasp tore from Michael's throat. He blinked, certain it must be the wind from an open window, but the windows were shut, the air inside still. A deep rumble of thunder shook the walls. The bishop's voice rose, chanting faster. Then, in the hush that followed a lightning strike, a distant cry echoed a baby's cry, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Michael's skin prickled. He stared around the nursery, searching for a rational explanation. The bishop's chanting grew louder, more urgent, and the cry faded as swiftly as it began. When Guzman turned to Michael, his eyes were burning with conviction. The child carries a dark influence with her. If we do not break it, it will grow. He grabbed Michael's wrist, pressing the small bottle of holy water into his palm. "You must have faith, or the darkness will claim her soul." Fear and confusion coursed through Michael. He half expected Eleanor to appear from the shadows with a satisfied grin, but she had, at his insistence, stayed away for this ritual. He stood alone with the bishop, terrified by what he'd just witnessed, aware of how insane it all sounded. A ghostly cry, a spinning mobile, flickering lights, were these illusions or real signs of something malignant? Bishop Guzman shook his head slowly. "This is beyond a mere blessing. The child herself needs the rite performed. The evil is bound to her. I can sense it." Michael swallowed hard. He didn't know how to ask Sharon for permission to let this man perform an exorcism on their infant. He already risked losing her by indulging in these superstitions. But every fibre of his being screamed that the bishop was right, that something unholy was trailing Emily like a shadow. In a frantic state, Michael drove to Sharon's mother's house. Rain pummeled the windshield, lightning illuminating the darkened sky. He needed to see his wife, to hold Emily, to explain what he'd witnessed. But he dreaded the confrontation. When he arrived, drenched from the downpour, Sharon met him at the front door. Her mother, Roberta Rutherford, hovered protectively in the background. Sharon looked exhausted, her hair in a messy bun, eyes puffy from crying. Emily was asleep in a crib set up in the living room. Michael tried to speak calmly, though his voice trembled. "Sharon, the first need to talk to you about something important." She nodded stiffly, stepping out onto the porch. The rain had lessened to a faint drizzle. "Go ahead." He took a breath. "I had Bishop Guzman bless the house. Just a blessing, I swear. But something happened." There was this cry, the lights flickered, the mobile moved on its own. He hated how terrified he sounded, like a small child recounting a nightmare. The bishop believes Emily is under a dark influence. He wants to perform a cleansing rite, an exorcism. The words rang in the humid night air, absurd and horrifying. Sharon's expression hardened. "No, absolutely not." "Sharon, please." She glared at him, eyes blazing. "You promised me you'd stop. You said you wouldn't do anything behind my back. And here you are again, talking about exorcisms. How dare you label our innocent daughter as demon-possessed?" Her voice rose, attracting the attention of Roberta, who stepped onto the porch. Sharon, tears streaming, continued, "I'm done, Michael. I can't let you near Emily if you insist on these deranged rituals." Anguish clutched at Michael's heart. But the bishop, he sensed something. "I can't sleep, can't function, believing Emily is in danger. Sharon, you haven't seen what I've seen." She turned her face away. "You're the danger, Michael. You and that twisted mistress of yours." She grabbed the door handle. "Stay away from us. If you force this, I'll go to court, get a restraining order. Anything to protect my child from your madness." The door slammed shut, leaving Michael on the porch, soaking wet, eyes stinging from more than the rain. He walked back to his car in a daze. His world was disintegrating. His affair had led him down a path of paranoia, and now he feared it was too late to turn back. Eleanor was waiting at Michael's mansion when he returned. She rushed to greet him, arms outstretched. For once, her usual poised demeanor showed genuine concern. "You look terrible," she murmured. He shrugged off her touch, collapsing onto a chair. "She won't let me near the baby." She threatened legal action. Eleanor studied him, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "We can't give up. That baby is a ticking time bomb. You've seen the signs. This is bigger than Sharon's anger. You have a responsibility to save your child's soul." Michael groaned, burying his face in his hands. "I don't even know what's real anymore. Maybe I'm losing my mind." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "You're not." She took his phone from the table and began dialing. "I'm calling Bishop Guzman. We'll figure out a way to see Emily." When Guzman arrived early the next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the sky an eerie shade of grey. He sat in the living room, sipping hot tea, while Michael explained Sharon's refusal. The bishop listened quietly, then set down his cup. "This child may be in grave danger. As her father, you have a moral obligation to protect her, even if it means going against the mother's wishes for a time." Michael's stomach churned. "I can't just take my daughter from Sharon's care without her consent. That's kidnapping." Bishop Guzman's gaze was unwavering. "You fear man's law, but what of God's wrath if you do nothing? The forces at work here are not concerned with legality. If you don't act, the baby's soul could be lost." A cold dread seeped into Michael's veins. He felt cornered, manipulated by two extremes, Sharon's fierce maternal love and the bishop's dire warnings. He flashed back to the haunting scenes in the nursery, the spinning mobile, the disembodied cry. He also recalled Marta's prayers, her mention of a strange presence around Emily. Could they all be wrong? Something told him, after all he'd witnessed, that the threat was real. Eleanor stepped in. I can arrange a meeting with Sharon to discuss a compromise. Maybe we can do the ritual in a neutral location, with medical professionals standing by, so she can see no harm will come to Emily. It sounded half plausible, even comforting. Guzman nodded in agreement, and Michael, desperate, latched onto the idea. Fine, set it up. Anything that gets Sharon to let the bishop see Emily. As they began making calls and arrangements, no one noticed the strange smile that passed across Eleanor's face. She had managed to keep Michael firmly entrenched in the belief that Emily was a threat, while also positioning herself as the architect of a compromise that would inevitably push Sharon further away. If all went according to plan, the exorcism would be the final nail in the coffin of Michael's marriage. The so-called compromise meeting took place at an acquaintance's private clinic, one that Eleanor had recommended. It was a modest building surrounded by tall hedges, affording a semblance of privacy. Sharon arrived only because she was told a professional pediatrician named Dr. Keating would be present to oversee any talk of spiritual interventions. Michael paced in the waiting area, his nerves on edge. Bishop Guzman sat quietly in a corner, reading from a worn prayer book. Eleanor feigned concern, busily tapping on her phone. Then Sharon walked in, Emily in her car seat, Roberta beside her. Sharon's face betrayed her fury and exhaustion all at once. Dr. Keating, a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, greeted Sharon and examined Emily thoroughly. She's healthy, she declared. No signs of physical ailment. I understand you're concerned about some unusual behaviors. Sharon glared at Michael. My husband thinks our baby is possessed, she said flatly, her voice dripping with disbelief. Michael glanced at Bishop Guzman, who rose to speak. Miss S. Carter, I understand your skepticism, but there are spiritual matters beyond our comprehension. Your daughter, Sharon, cut him off. You're not touching her. If you try, I swear I'll call the police. Eleanor, stepping in with practiced diplomacy, said, Sharon, no one wants to harm Emily. We just want to ensure she's free of any negative energy. Dr. Keating is here to supervise everything. She cast a sympathetic look at the pediatrician. Isn't that right, Doctor? Doctor? Keating cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable. I was told my role was to verify the child's physical well-being. I don't endorse or specialize in exorcisms, but I can remain present if it eases your mind. Sharon shook her head, holding Emily close. This is insane. I can't believe I'm even standing here, defending my baby from this. Roberta placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. We should leave, she whispered. This is a setup. But at that moment, Michael fell to his knees, arms extended to Sharon. Please, Sharon. I love you. I love Emily. I don't want to lose you both. But if there's any chance at all that Emily is in danger from something beyond us, I can't live without trying to protect her. Tears brimmed in Sharon's eyes. She was torn between revulsion at what Michael had become and a lingering love for the man she once knew. Against her better judgment, she wavered. Promise me this won't hurt Emily. Promise me this is just a prayer, nothing more. Guzman nodded. That's all it is. A prayer of deliverance and protection. With trembling hands, Sharon placed Emily on an examination table. The baby, sensing the tension, whimpered softly. Doctor. Keating stood on one side, stethoscope around her neck, while Bishop Guzman stood on the other side with a Bible, a rosary, and his vial of holy water. Michael hovered near the head of the table, tears in his eyes. In hushed Latin, Guzman began the rite. At first, nothing happened. Emily merely squirmed and fussed. But as Guzman's voice rose, the overhead lights flickered. A chill wind, unexplainable in the enclosed space, blew through the room. Sharon gasped. Even Dr. Keating looked startled. Emily's eyes shot open, her cries turning shrill. For a terrifying moment, it did sound otherworldly, high-pitched and layered, as if multiple voices wailed in unison. The lights fluttered more aggressively, and suddenly Emily's tiny body convulsed. Dr. Keating rushed forward, calling out, "She's seizing!" Fear sparked in her gaze. Guzman persisted, voice resolute in prayer. Michael, in panic, clasped his daughter's flailing hand. Sharon let out a scream of pure terror. "Stop it! You're hurting her!" But just as abruptly as it began, Emily's body stilled, and the room fell silent. A final flicker of the fluorescent bulbs left them bathed in eerie half-light. Bishop Guzman, beads of sweat on his forehead, recited a final line in Latin, then whispered, "It is done." Emily's eyes rolled back, and she let out a weak cry, just a normal, baby-like cry. Doctor Keating scrambled to examine her. Heart rate, normal, pupils, responsive, breath, stabilizing. The pediatrician's relief was palpable. "It looks like she had a brief spasm, but she's okay now," she reassured Sharon. "We'll need to run tests to be sure." Sharon snatched Emily up, sobbing, pressing her close to her chest. She glared at Michael with hatred and disbelief. "I can't do this anymore." Michael, tears streaming, tried to comfort her. But Sharon spun, her voice shaking with rage. "Keep away from us, or I swear on my life, you'll never see your daughter again." She turned to Dr. Keating. "Are we done here? We're leaving." The stunned doctor could only nod. As Sharon left, Roberta gave Michael a withering stare. "How could you?" she hissed, then followed her daughter out the door. Michael stood in the wake of the storm, feeling hollow. Eleanor stepped forward, a triumphant gleam in her eye. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "It had to be done," she said softly. "Now the darkness is banished, and Emily can have a normal life." He spun on her, unexpected anger surging. "Why do you sound so happy?" He spat. "Sharon hates me. She's never been so terrified in her life. And Emily, God, I nearly lost her." Eleanor blinked in surprise, then composed herself. "Michael, the first. I'm just relieved it's over." Bishop Guzman, pale and shaken, murmured, "The demon has been driven out, but the rifts left behind might take time to heal. I'll keep praying for your family." With that, he gathered his belongings and departed, leaving Michael alone with Eleanor and a whirlwind of regret. They left the clinic in silence. As Michael drove them back to the mansion, he felt numb. The exorcism was supposed to give him peace, but all it left was devastation. Sharon's sobbing face replayed in his mind on an endless loop. When they arrived home, Eleanor tried to comfort him with a warm embrace, but he pushed her away. "Get out," he said quietly. She looked startled. "What do you mean?" "I need time to think," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alone." Eleanor hesitated, but the darkness in his eyes made her think twice. With a huff, she gathered her purse and left, leaving him alone in the massive, empty house. That night, Michael called Marta. She had left her position when Sharon moved out, not wanting to take sides. After a few rings, her gentle voice came through. "Mr. Carter?" "Marta," he whispered, "did we do the right thing?" A pause. "I don't know," she said gently. Only God knows what truly lurked around Emily. But I do know that fear can make us do terrible things. Michael let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I'm sorry for dragging you into all this," Marta sighed. "I'll pray for you, Mr. Carter. I'll pray that you find your way back to your family." He thanked her and hung up, feeling a wave of despair. Outside, a soft rain began to fall again, pattering against the windows. He wondered if the storm would ever truly end. Days turned into weeks. True to her word, Sharon refused to let Michael see Emily unless supervised. She petitioned for temporary custody, citing emotional distress and claiming Michael's actions put the baby at risk. The tabloids soon got wind of the bizarre story. Millionaire father calls exorcist for newborn baby. The scandal hit the local news, and Michael's reputation took a damaging blow. Inside Carter Interiors, rumors flew about the boss's mental stability, contracts wavered, and board members whispered about forced leadership changes. Meanwhile, Eleanor tried to position herself as Michael's sole ally, even as doubts churned in his mind. Late one night, rummaging through old company records in search of a forgotten contract, Michael stumbled upon something peculiar. An email chain from a few months back, between Eleanor and a private investigator. With growing dread, he read the messages. They detailed Sharon's family background, personal financial information, even tidbits about Sharon's pregnancy schedule. Further down, Eleanor explicitly wrote instructions: find any evidence, medical or otherwise, that could be leveraged against the Carter baby. Michael's blood ran cold. She'd been plotting to undermine Sharon from the beginning, even before Emily was born. Shock turned to fury as he pieced it all together. Eleanor had orchestrated the entire scenario, planting the idea of demonic possession, fueling every suspicion, arranging the exorcist. He realized he'd been a pawn in her manipulative game. She wanted him alienated from Sharon, locked in a cycle of fear, so she could seize control of him, of his fortune, of Carter Interiors. Without hesitation, Michael confronted Eleanor at her penthouse. He held the printed emails in trembling hands. "What the hell is this?" he demanded the moment she opened the door. Eleanor's eyes flickered in alarm. "Michael, calm down," she said, trying to muster her usual composure. "Calm down?" he roared, stepping inside and slamming the door. "You lied to me. You made me believe Emily was possessed. You fed my fears, drove my wife away. For what? Money? A corporate takeover? Or were you just bored with your life?" Eleanor's face twisted in anger. "You were unhappy in your marriage, Michael. I offered you a way out. Don't pretend you're blameless. You wanted to believe the baby was cursed. You let me in." He shook his head, tears of rage and regret. "I might have strayed, but I never wanted my daughter harmed. I never wanted this insanity." She sneered, dropping the mask of concern. "Spare me the moral outrage. You're no saint. You slept with me behind your wife's back, and you clung to me when you thought your child was a demon. We're both complicit." Michael clenched his fists, resisting the urge to lash out physically. "Get out of my life," he hissed. "You're fired from the company, and if you try to fight me on it, I'll expose everything." For the first time, Eleanor showed real fear. She opened her mouth to protest, but one look at Michael's grim determination silenced her. With that, Michael stormed out, leaving the door to the penthouse ajar behind him. He felt unburdened, as if a crushing weight had lifted from his shoulders, yet he also felt sick with guilt. He'd played right into her hands, risking everything dear to him in the process. After severing ties with Eleanor, Michael embarked on a painful journey to mend what he had broken. He started by withdrawing the custody challenge he'd initiated in a moment of rage. Then he arranged a meeting with Sharon's lawyer, offering full transparency about what had happened with Eleanor. Though the details sounded unbelievable, the lawyer recognized Michael's remorse and cooperativeness. Meanwhile, Sharon remained guarded. Every time Michael approached her, she recalled the horrifying moment Emily convulsed under the bishop's chanting. The memory seemed etched in her mind, like a scar. Yet she also saw Michael truly trying to fix things. His eyes no longer carried that manic gleam of a man convinced his baby was the devil. During one particularly tense phone call, Michael poured out his soul. "Sharon, I was wrong. I let fear and guilt warp my judgment. I'm sorry for everything. I'd do anything to make it right." She listened in silence, tears quietly slipping down her cheeks. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but Emily deserves a father. And maybe, in time, we can figure out how to be her parents together. They arranged supervised visits. Michael held Emily for the first time in weeks, tears streaming down his face as she blinked up at him. There were no dark shadows in her eyes, only the innocent curiosity of a newborn. Sharon watched from across the room, arms folded. The heartbreak in her gaze was clear, but so was the faint flicker of hope. Months passed. Michael started therapy to confront his guilt and the underlying issues that had made him so vulnerable to Eleanor's manipulation. He took a leave of absence from Carter Interiors, placing a trusted colleague in charge. Slowly, he rebuilt trust with Sharon, respecting her boundaries, never pushing too hard. He remained committed to seeing Emily, assisting financially without overstepping, and participating in her milestones under Sharon's watchful eye. Eventually, Dr. Keating's test showed that Emily was perfectly healthy. The spasm she experienced during the exorcism might have been triggered by stress, or perhaps the flickering lights. Regardless of the cause, there was no lasting damage. The baby grew stronger, her eyes sparkling with the wonder of infancy, no trace of any diabolical presence. As for Eleanor, she quietly vanished from the company scene. Rumors circulated that she'd taken a job overseas or changed her name. Michael didn't care to find out. He focused on what truly mattered, his daughter's well-being and the hope that, in time, Sharon might forgive him enough to allow them a fresh start, if not as husband and wife, then at least as co-parents aligned in their love for Emily. The name Bishop Guzman gradually faded from Michael's memory. In hindsight, that chaotic swirl of exorcists, possessed babies, and manipulative mistresses felt like a nightmare made real. But it had also served as a brutal lesson in the power of fear and suggestion. Michael vowed never again to let paranoia rule his life. And so ends the tumultuous tale of Millionaire's Mistress, made him believe his wife's baby was the devil he called an exorcist. What began as a swirl of secrets, guilt, and manipulation nearly destroyed an entire family. In the aftermath, Michael Carter discovered the devastating consequences that arise when we allow fear and deceit to guide our actions, and the profound redemption that can follow sincere remorse. If you found this story gripping, filled with unsettling twists, and a powerful message about the dangers of paranoia and betrayal, please consider supporting this channel. Like this video if you've been captivated by the drama, share it with friends who love real-life fiction that borders on the incredible, and subscribe for more riveting tales. Your support helps us continue to bring you stories that push the boundaries of fear, hope, and the unbreakable bond of family.